So in this short video I thought that I would just talk over one of the rewards that I've been making. When I say rewards, I had a crowdfunding campaign for an exhibition that was due to take place this April, and as part of that I offered a variety of rewards, and one of them was a small maquette, maquette being a small model sculpture of the bronze that I was making for the exhibition, for which the crowdfunding campaign was to raise funds, and that was successful. So this was really the top reward, if you like, for people supporting me. I was producing just 3, so it's a little edition of 3. You can see him there. Who is he? What is he? He comes from a series of works where I've developed this quasi-person. I call all my little people quasi-people because they're not real, they're not one particular person, they're not one particular character or related to any particular symbolic character or deity or god denominationally. Now, he nevertheless carries the word deity because I wanted him to consist of those formal aspects of deities, of devotional objects that I've seen over the years in museums around the world. These could be religious figurines from pre-Hellenistic Greece, sort of Cycladic devotional figures. They could be what I saw some Chola bronzes in India that are sort of contemporary with the sort of bronzes and stone carving from medieval times in the UK and Europe, which but bore some amazing, striking similarities really in the figuration. And also I've seen in my travels in predominantly Hong Kong, but in Asia generally, figurines there from the Tang dynasty. Some are spiritual, some are just human figures, but nevertheless they have this spirit about them and a character that I've absorbed and wanted to try and pull together. And because they're in the main all functioning in some way as votive objects or carrying some spiritual significance, I wanted to shred the specifics but retain the form that appealed to me artistically, but not just in a artistically way, but in a way that means that I'm looking at an object that I'm going back to because it's giving me something, it's reaching out, it's connecting with me, and I go back to that in the same way that we go back to a poem or a piece of music or a good book, because it's saying something about the world. You can't necessarily pin it down, but it has got substance, it's got worth, and it comes through something that has been described as, in the past, significant form. Now, you can read about this in the early 20th century in the writings of Clive Bell, if you so wish. It's a slightly, possibly not even slightly, it's on the back foot these days, let's say, in terms of talking about art and art objects and how art is made and how art, the value of art, how it functions, and how artists think about the art object and interpret or write about the art object, for example. Is that too much information? Perhaps it is. This is ostensibly around me making this, so possibly I ought to rein it in a bit, and we go back to some of the fundamentals of making. Okay, so from blocks of Chavant like this and this, I've eventually ended up with this little fella. He's a small version of the bronze that that's still in the foundry thanks to COVID-19, and I haven't seen yet. But he's a smaller version of the non-denominational deity that I created for the exhibition of geometry and God side by side, which was going to be at Sandham Memorial Chapel this April, but as I've said before, the show got cancelled. It has been rearranged for September the 30th through to October the 18th. Fingers crossed, but it's all down to the restrictions being lifted. Okay, so how did I get to this? Not in terms of what he looks like, but in terms of the actual making. Okay, so I'm just going to put him to one side. What I've got here is another version, and there's a little head which will go on there. A slightly larger version I'm going to explore, and again there'll be some variants, but it shows you literally how you can see some little bits of wood in here. There we are. I've got these long thin skewers bought from the local Chinese supermarket for you know doing satays, and they make very good useful armatures for the clay. Obviously you may want to use something thicker and more substantial. If you're more traditional, you're going to make a wire armature of some kind. It is possible. Let me just get this fella. This was a little figure I made for my first animated feature recently. You'll see that it's going to be part of an online exhibition in June, soon to be announced, and there'll be details on my website about that. This is one of the little just purely handmade figures, and this is a soft Chavant. It's very like clay, except it doesn't dry, doesn't crack, and it's non-sulphurous. Now the importance, just pop him back up there as well. The importance of non-sulphurous material comes into play when it comes to doing the moulds. It's very important for the silicon rubber that it doesn't actually adhere. There's a chemical reaction. If I was using something like plasticine, for example, it does have sulphur content, then the silicon wouldn't necessarily key and hold the detail the same. So there are, and with the Chavant there are three different grades. There's a soft, there's a medium and a hard. Chavant is a proprietary name just for non-sulphurous plasticine. Unhelpfully, they're all pretty much the same colour. That is the hard. It's slightly darker, greeny grey. That's the soft. So to help me, I carve in underneath the S so I know which is which. Because in these warm conditions, I tell you, after a while, it's not that noticeable. You can easily end up working with some, after a while in the hands it becomes quite malleable, and if you're working away, listening to the radio and thinking, you can quite easily pick up a piece of what you believe is hard and think that it's worked, and it'll turn out just to be soft, and you'll never get the precision and the detail that one is seeking by using the hard with very small tools, because the soft is really the properties of it, which are very nice. They contain thumbprints, and it's a lot more of an expressive medium rather than a carving or engraving medium. So if you know the sort of the little ballerinas, the little dancers that Degas did, the little hand wax figures that were cast into bronze, they're full of expression. That would be in something that's as malleable, obviously at that time it was wax, like the soft Chavant. So that's a distinction there. You end up making a series of choices, but then you have to commit and work with it. It's a very interesting medium. I've only just started using it recently. The sort of tools you use with it, actually that's not often used with it, but I found it very, very useful for flattening out and doing various things where you need a little bit of extra pressure. But most people talking about Chavant aren't going to be talking about mallets. More traditionally, quite a nice little clay knife there I use for just cutting off slabs. That's very useful. These are just two little brass plats from B&Q. They've got a nice bit of picture wire there and makes a very good cutter. You can just pull through like that. Fantastic. What else have I got? Most of these will be recognisable to you. I've got a whole bunch of traditional sort of tools here for pulling through and taking off material as you work. Got different shapes at the end. If you want to know how to use these, you've seen them before, never used them, the best way is just get a lump of the stuff and just work out what tool takes away what material in what way. And you can actually end up finishing. They're slightly beveled on the outside, so you can actually use them as a smoothing spatula as well. Very versatile, great. Onto the spatulas, got all sorts here. They've nearly always got a sort of blade side, a sort of series of hard edges. Then that one's got a nice flat one. You've got more of a sort of a, you know, if you're at the doctor's you get something like that, or a lollipop stick, but it's rounded off nicely. You can put all sorts of, there's one there with a groove, a series of grooves on there where you can apply texture. So there's a whole load of stuff there with those tools one can experiment with, and I look forward to doing so. I haven't really been using all those techniques I've just explained on the little fella. Some other ones, fantastic. These were really useful when I was doing the large wax sort of bronze. You can get all sorts of nice indentations, whether they just be purely spherical, pushed into the surface, or you may want to make repeated marks that make very nice shallow sort of repeated grooves, which again, whatever you're casting into, whether it be plaster, resin or bronze, in that happy and costly scenario, again you will find these tools very, very useful, and they're quite cheap to pick up. So what else can I tell you? Oh yeah, one final tool there, nice sharp double-ended tool in wood. Again, you can get very fine detail. There's no sort of black magic to all this. There's no sort of secret tips that I can give you if you're interested in having a go yourself, other than one major just get on and do it type tip. It's a very empirical medium. Obviously if you want to make a small addition or something, then you produce a mould, then you commit in all sorts of ways. But when it comes to the modelling, just get the material, get on with it, and see what comes out. You're drawing in 3D really, and think of this area as a three-dimensional sketchbook where you can throw stuff away. Yeah.